Hello and welcome to the Hey Joe Show.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Aaron. I know you had a wonderful Valentine's Day. And
of course I did. I got to spend it with my family.
Yes, you did. And as a matter of fact, I will go ahead and tell on her. She cooked an amazing meal with my daughter.
Yeah, your daughter cooked an amazing meal.
I guess my mother-in-law and my mother.
Your mother.
So all the ladies in my life. Which
Pretty
is
much.
really interesting to think about that. But we're glad that you joined us tonight. We know that things are chilly out there. We know that things are getting dangerous, at least here in Middle Tennessee.
Well, in Texas and Oregon,
Texas,
at least that's what I just
Oregon.
heard. I mean, so it's really,
if it hasn't hit you, then you know what? You need to be praying for everyone else.
Yes, there you go.
Because it's going to, concern is it's going to lock everything down. Yes. Right? And so
what did we do today? We made sure to run to the store.
That's right. We got our bread and our milk. That's exactly what you do.
A lot more than that.
You know what's funny is when I think about this, I think everybody out in Denver or these places that get a lot of snow, if they were to see what we're dealing with, they would look at that and go, you are sissies.
Here's the thing, though. Normally, I would kind of laugh because, there'd be a prediction of 2 inches of snow and everything would be locked down. But we are dealing with a lot of ice in the area, and ice is a totally different ballgame. There's already been pileups. That's it, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of wrecks.
Accidents in our area.
What we're due to get is ice and then snow, and of course that right now we're dealing with black ice around us. Anyhow, so we're glad to be warm and inside with electricity here at the Hey Joe Show
too, because
tonight.
That way you can listen to the Hey Joe Show.
So we're going to go ahead and get started and get right into the subject at hand. And of course, this particular season, we are getting back into our cultural topics, and some of them are hot button cultural topics. And some of them are more informational.
Okay.
And so what we're going to deal with tonight is an informational subject. Now, I will tell you this. Aaron and I have some plans. We're coming up with plans for future shows. Yes. And I will tell you this. I believe we're going to have a good announcement
are hot button topics.
For the next show. And if you've been watching the Hey Joe Show or listening for any amount of time now, then you know that we don't shy away from those. We just want to make sure we're ready for that show, right? And so that's why we chose not to jump into one of those hot button topics tonight. But that
will be coming.
Take away from what we're talking about, because we're talking about Generation Z tonight. Gen Z.
Tell me about Gen Z. What is Gen Z for those who don't know?
Gen Z is the one that came after millennials, right? So the millennial generation are really the young parents today. Some of them maybe are still in college, perhaps. But Gen Z are our teenagers today, roughly through our college students. That's all in that Gen Z category. They are called Gen Z by some. I don't know where Gen Z comes from.
It doesn't matter.
But I know iGen is because of all the in-depth technological advances that really have shaped this generation when it comes to like when the first smartphone came out, when commercialized internet came out, when the first iPad came out, the advancement of video games, and of course all of those.
Making me feel really old.
I know you and I both remember before cell phones were everybody had one. I know you do.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about that. It just makes me feel old to think, oh, yeah, I remember the first iPhone, the first iPad. It really was not that long ago.
No, we're talking 2007 was the first iPhone. 2010 was the first iPad. So we're not even talking 11 years fully since the iPad came out. And what is that, 14 years since the iPhone came out? I can do math. So here's the deal. We're talking about a generation then that has known technology from the start. And the importance of that is, well, of course, they've learned skills that you and I had to adapt to.
Right.
Because when we were growing up, it wasn't a deal of, well, education is on technology. All of our games are on technology. Our trading cards are within an app. I mean, you think about that.
Trading
You can
cards? Oh, now you
download.
are
Let me
aging
tell
yourself.
you
You're
can
really aging
download
yourself.
an app and trade baseball cards.
So,
Isn't that weird?
no, actually, it seems very normal for today's day and age.
Yeah, I guess. Now, let me ask you this. Did you grow up around the time of Pokemon? Was Pokemon a big thing when you were growing up?
I don't remember. If
I'm
it
guessing
was,
it wasn't.
I don't care.
It
I
wasn't
didn't
for
care.
me either. And so you think about all the things that have happened with Gen Z. And what's interesting is from about 2012, 2015 down to where we are today, a lot of folks are saying that people who watch Generation and do generational studies, they're saying that that's a brand new generation. So the young children, and of course there's some variation on when that break occurs between Gen Z and the youngest generation that we have today. And then, of course, I'm sure you have some who will say, well, that's no different generation. They're the same. Either way, the idea is this. They are the most connected out of every generation that we've ever seen. They are the most technologically, digitally connected. They are the most
4 times fast.
Yeah, I don't think I can. They are the most tech savvy. And of course,
This is definitely true.
maybe hard to argue against maybe what the millennials had, but even some of the millennials, when you really think about the millennial generation going up until like 1980, 1981 was the top of the millennial generation. You're talking about people that are still, they had to get used to the internet.
That would be
right?
me.
And so where we are today, though, is this, that with the more technological advances, higher skills in that area, it's interesting to consider the expectations within Generation Z that they have of themselves. And so what we have is tonight we're going to discuss some of the findings of an article that came out by Barna. And, of course, I'll include these in the show notes. But it came out at the end of January, so it's not that long ago. It's not even a month old. It said new data on Gen Z, and then this is the new data pertaining to the perceptions of pressure, anxiety, and empowerment. Pressures, anxieties, and empowerments. Now, here's why that's significant. When you really start to dive into what this particular study focused in on, at least this particular component of it, it focused in on expectations.
Okay.
And those expectations of what does it mean to be successful, and where would you, I guess, hang your hat on the idea of am I successful or am I not? And what it came up with was this. And, of course, I don't know if this – I don't think it's any different for your generation, next generation, millennial generation, or anything like that. Of course, you are on the cusp.
Millennial and
technically, I guess I am too.
No, 1980.
Gen
1980. X. You're in a generation above
I'm
me,
Gen X
even though you're
by
only 21
2
months older
years.
than me.
That's right. So obviously there's some gray lines there, and I'm not talking about the hair in my beard. But it said this, that when it comes to the idea of success, most Gen Zers feel that they have been successful thus far, and 3 out of every 4, or roughly 77%, would agree with the idea that they've been successful. When it comes to
just in general, successful in general.
At this point in time, yes, they have not necessarily defined that in this particular article. I'm sure the study does.
Okay.
But at this point in time, is when it comes to what does it mean. Now, that means that 77% agree that right now they've been successful. But 91% of them who were surveyed in this particular poll are looking forward to the next 10 years of their life. So that we're talking about bouncing 15-year-olds to 25-year-olds and 18-year-olds to 28-year-olds. And they're looking forward to what that brings. Now, if you were looking forward to something, what might you think would be a part of that, of your expectation? Why would you look forward to something?
Well, I don't 100% know where you're going with this question. However, I know that when I was a teenager, like 15 through 18, definitely I think that 10-year, if you jump ahead to like your 20s, I mean, think about it. They're not saying they're looking forward to the next 20 years because for some reason, I think when you're a teenager, 30 just seems so old. And so you don't want to get there. But at the same time, getting out of your teen years and getting into your 20s, it feels like, oh, I'm an adult now, but I'm not old because I'm not 30, and it's like, oh, I can get into my working job. I can, it's like you've arrived, but yet
30
you haven't
being
expired.
old.
You've arrived
without having that is a quote that needs to go on social media.
There you go.
So somebody needs to do a screenshot of this right now and make that the quote, right?
Okay.
You've arrived without expiring. Is that what you just said?
That's what I said.
Wow. I guess if I'm looking forward to it, and it's what you said too, there's some form of positive expectation, right? Otherwise, am I really going to look forward to it, right? I guess it's kind of the idea of if I need a root canal, am I looking forward to going to the dentist? Well, you might be able to say, yes, I am, because I'm ready for the pain to go away. Or you might be able to say, I'm not looking forward to having a root canal. So there's a couple ways to look at that, right? You can look at it and take the whole package and say that it's a great thing. Or it's possible to look at the individual components and say, I'm not real happy about that, right? Here's what's interesting. When it comes to so many individuals in Generation Z looking forward to the future, it doesn't necessarily, and I love this quote, despite generally having a success-oriented mindset, Gen Z's future orientation doesn't necessarily equal sunny optimism.
Okay.
I feel like I need a breath there. Sunny optimism.
Okay, so just because they're looking forward to the future, they don't have sunny optimism? Is that what you
get this.
said?
The same young people who said they're looking forward to the 10 years from now, 91%, 56% of them said they fully expect the worst to happen.
That doesn't even make sense.
I would agree with that. But think about, why would individuals in Gen Z expect the worst to happen?
Is this
Think
after
in their
this
culture.
last year?
Well,
do they expect that now after the last year?
Well, this study, it's possible that COVID played into that.
And everything else.
It's possible COVID did.
Okay.
But think about what they grew up with, too. Now, these are individuals, and I'd have to go back and see when they were born, but doing my math, roughly 15 to 18-year-olds, maybe up into 23, down to possibly
so late 90s.
12, 13 years old. So think about what occurred when they were growing up. What has their childhood been? And you start to look at and reflect on events that occurred, let's say, from 1995.
Why would you be looking forward to
today.
Something when you think it's going to be a disaster, pretty much?
Well, I think it's the idea of, can I look forward to it even though I fully expect that within that next 10 years bad things will happen?
Okay, I guess my brain just doesn't work like that.
Well,
okay.
I guess it's this, right? If my events that have occurred in my generation have been 9/11, the war on terror, the economic downturn that occurred around 2007, 2008, people who were retired now having to go back to work because the bank account was never big enough. Individuals that we had fewer mothers staying home and more going back into the workforce. So we almost recreated again this concept of the latchkey kid. You had cyberbullying really take off and become a major issue with the lower portion of the millennials and the upper portion of Gen Zers. You have other concepts that are related perhaps to financial ruin or terrorism, or you go through the line and you start talking about the fallout of all of this, right? And I haven't even done a study on what has happened to families, and I need to do this, and perhaps maybe some of you will know, but what has happened to family units post war on terror, right? In other words, when more people had to go back to work, couldn't have retirement because everything went way down with the stocks and with the retirements, plus two-income households, what impact did all of that play in marriages? What impact did that play on family and time spent together? So
that's going back to the article. What was the headline again? What were the three? I remember PAP.
Yeah. Perceptions of pressure, anxiety, and empowerment.
Oh, empowerment.
Pressure, anxiety, and empowerment.
POE. Okay.
Which is interesting because you then start to look at this.
yeah, pressure and anxiety seem to kind of go together, but empowerment, that almost seems like left field.
Right. But this article does a good job of tying them in, and I really believe that at the end of the day, it does make sense when an individual reads this article, because here's the deal. When you have pressure and anxiety and you're starting off with the idea of what do you think the next 10 years are going to be, right? The idea is, okay, if you believe it's going to be successful, you believe your life is successful, first of all, how do you define success? But also then you start talking about, are there pressures to be successful, right? And I thought this was quite interesting that kind of unfolds that onion a little bit, because it says this: those who are internally pressured always or usually feel. So you have two factors. You have internal pressure and you have external pressures that are put on individuals, right? Okay. And I believe internal pressures and external pressures have always been a part of being a human. I don't believe that because Gen Z is a particular generation, they are the only ones who ever experienced this. I believe pressure is a part of all of it, right? So here's the deal, though. Are we dealing with something that kind of snowballs into each other, pressure into anxiety, and anxiety possibly into empowerment, or is empowerment the answer? Of course, as a Christian, from a Christian worldview, the issue is how do you instill empowerment, right? And I believe that empowerment doesn't come by what you achieve, because if that's the case, it's always going to come as an ebb and flow.
Right.
It comes with something else. So here's what this study said. From an internal pressure, 56% internally feel pressure to be successful. And then 42% feel internally a need to be perfect.
So they put that pressure on themselves.
Right. Now, here's the deal. I would really be curious how they define success. Because is success a financial definition? Is success a family?
Recognition.
Is it recognition?
Public recognition.
But either way, the idea is this. Look, I've got to be successful. Now, I would argue this, that all of us internally desire to be successful. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm impressed that only 56% said they feel it to be successful. So does that mean that the other 44
really gave their 100% truthful answer?
Yeah. Does 44% then not feel that they need to be successful? Or maybe the idea is this: it's not a pressure. They want to be, they aim to be, but 44% aren't going to allow the definition of successful according to this study. And of course, I don't have all of that before me, right? But either way, it's the idea that there's that internal push. Now, here, though, is the external push. 42% said that they are judged by older generations, and that compels them to desire, or they feel pressure to be successful. And 39% are pressured by their parents' expectations.
Oh.
Now, again, I would say that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know?
That could go either way. The parents could be actually just wanting them to meet their full potential, but of course, there's always a boundary there for not going overboard.
Right, and then there's also the reality of: is it possible parents can be so afraid of their own children failing or repeating mistakes they made that they are driving their kids to say, look, if I could go back and do it all over again, this is what I would do. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the child feels pressure from that standpoint.
Right. And there's never, it's always good to remember what you were about to say, which as of right now, I do not. So moving along to the next point.
Preachers, believe it or not, we've got a skill set there, I firmly believe, of we may not know what's coming next, but we know that we just got to keep talking, and eventually it'll come back to us.
I could have done that, but I decided to make a joke instead.
You said, well, that works too.
There you go.
That works
All
too.
right, let's move on.
No, you're okay. So here's the deal then. So the pressure snowballing into anxiety, right? So 47% are afraid to fail. Afraid to fail. 51% are anxious about important decisions, and 45% are uncertain about the future. Let those numbers sink in.
So they're excited but uncertain.
Correct. They expect the worst to happen, but they're looking forward to it, which is a weird state to live in.
It is. I'm sitting here just...
Are you always living on pins and needles? Think about that. Are you always living on pins and needles? I'm looking forward to, and I'm trying to put myself back into the situation of, graduating high school, being in college, ready to get out of college, ready to be married, the ready for the change of life in that sense, but then living with an internal concept or of either that I'm putting on myself or an external that other people are putting on me. Look, buddy, you can't blow this, right? You can't blow this. It's quite interesting because I believe that the pressure to succeed leads, if you're not careful, to an unhealthy level of concern. Because one of the things that we've learned is fear and anxiety go hand in hand. It's just there's a healthy element to fear and an unhealthy element to anxiety, right? Isn't that what this concept really is that individuals can have an increased uncertainty, which leads to a lifestyle, not just I'm uncertain about this situation.
Article, you said it doesn't specify that these teens in this last year per se, because obviously I think this past year would play a lot into what these teens thought or this generation thought.
Correct. And I would agree with that as well, because
I mean, even if it doesn't specifically outline it, I would think this past year had to have had a pretty big effect.
Right. And I would definitely say that. And so when you really look at it, it does bring in 2020. And I think that's quite interesting because one of the things it says is this particular individual's reflecting upon the study. It says the hope is that a year like this, 2020, which was full of pressure, actually will help shape and refine them into people who know their identity in God and are ready to grow in that. And so I guess what they're saying when it comes down to it, the anxiety and the fear that either generational situations can occur or with things like 2020 specific, right? So here's the deal. We all went through 2020. We all are going to look back at this. I mean, look, they're going to write history books about what happened with the COVID-19 virus. 100 years from now, there's going to be studies going on. If God allows America to be around, there will be studies regarding that as it impacted America, right? And so I don't think that that's going to – this is a pivotal marker in our studies of generations of our American history.
Oh, definitely.
But we're at a different stage than they are in the sense that we are – I hate to say this, in the middle of our life concept, right? We're still growing. We're not done. We haven't transitioned into retirement. And so we're really halfway between getting started and getting done with our work life.
Now move along there.
I'm just saying. Sometimes I get a little excited about that one. Of course, people would say, "Do preachers ever really retire?" Right?
Okay,
I don't
moving
know if
along.
they do.
You're chasing a.
I know, chasing a rabbit, but that's all right. That's all right. So here's the deal, though. When it comes to the anxiety, I believe that that's not a bad thing either. If it's, I need to be careful how I say this. Worry is not something that God wants us to have. There's no doubt about that. Jesus would speak against that in the Sermon on the Mount, and he would say, look, you can't add anything to your day by worrying. You can't change anything by worrying, so seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And all these other things, they're going to be taken care of, right? And it really is this concept of everything I am, I'm going to pour into. God's going to take care of that. God's going to take care of that. But here's also the deal. There are some elements of fear or uncertainty that can be beneficial, because they can shape us in how we respond. They can shape us in what we are prepared to respond to next. In other words, how do I know I can deal with that next thing? Well, I know I can deal with that next thing because I was able to have success in dealing with this thing.
Right.
And each difficulty is a hurdle. And so the more hurdles you jump, the more confident you become in being able to jump the next hurdle.
This is where the empowerment comes
That's
in.
Right. So it's the pressure snowballing into the anxiety, which is in this article, but then that snowballs into, I believe that I can accomplish what may come next. I fully expect something to come next, but I believe I will be ready for it next, right? So here's the deal. Of those who are empowered always or usually, now this is all talking to the same kids about, do you feel empowered, things along those lines. it says that 61% feel like they are able to accomplish their goals. So I'm uncertain about failing, some would say. I'm anxious about important decisions, uncertain about the future, but I believe I'm going to be able to accomplish my goals. 55% are satisfied with their life choices. 65%, someone believes in me. Those who are always empowered will say that 65%, someone believes in me. 50% will say prepared for everyday life. What about optimistic about the future? 55%, which is quite interesting. When you start looking at, I fully expect the worst and I'm afraid to fail, but you know what? I'm pretty optimistic about the future. And they're deeply cared for by those around them, 63%. Now, here's something that I want to kind of bring out.
Okay, bring it out. This I'm getting the 5-minute marker from our new producer.
This is kind of the take-home moment, right?
Okay.
We understand pressures occur because life occurs. Mm-hmm. We understand sometimes we handle those pressures in better ways than others.
Definitely.
And Gen Z is no different.
Okay.
But here's something that I want us to take home. In the cases where individuals feel prepared to accomplish the future, the majority, over 60%, said, I believe I can accomplish what's going to come ahead, no matter how bad it is, because I have people who love me and I have people who support me. Now, here's where I want to bring that home. That's part of why the family unit is so significant in the life of children.
Imagine if everyone made that family union a priority, that 60% could be 70, 80, 90%.
Right. And what if, and just because 65% said someone believes in me or 63% said somebody deeply cares for me, what if it's just that those people really do deeply care and support them? They just haven't expressed that to them, right? So today's Valentine's Day. It's a big day to express your love, to express how much somebody else means to you. Can you imagine how powerful it would be if other individuals, not just in Generation Z, but in this youngest generation, were able to hear from their parents, from their grandparents, how much they love them and support them and believe in them to accomplish whatever's going to come up in the future?
Well, and I would take that even a step farther.
Well, I had some fartherings. Go ahead.
I would take that and I would say, imagine if you not only had family that supported you, but brought God into everything, and that with God on your side, it's going to be okay no matter what happens.
Well, and that's the common sense. We talk about common sense. What usually is our common advice? And our common advice at times is, you can do it because of you. But to your point, what if the anxiety could be relieved when we really boil that down and we just simply say this? Or we say, look, do it or not.
Because of God.
Yes, obviously because of God. But I guess what I was going to say is this: do it or not. Achieve it or fail. At the end of the day, God's only called you to be faithful and to glorify Him in every situation.
It seems like a deep concept for young people, but I totally think that would be cheating them not to think that they could get this.
I agree. And so the question is, then how? Is it only, and we know the answer, it's not just by the verbal instruction of the parents. It's also by the lifestyle. And that's where this comes home. Mm-hmm. And that is this. Those of you who are listening to this, the parents who are tuning in, those who may play this in front of a parent-teen group or whatever it is, the reality is this: kids need to see how to deal with pressures and fears or anxieties in real ways that direct them back to God. And if our perspective as adults is not that way, then our children will see that. Mm-hmm. And it will only lead to more anxiety. Oftentimes, not always, but often, my experience, and I'm just what I am, right? There are people who know a whole lot more than me, but it is quite interesting that when individuals handle circumstances a certain way, especially children, oftentimes you can see that they learn to handle those situations through the adults in their life. That's where they learned it.
Well, and you have to, you have to look at as you age. Are you going to handle every situation the way you should when you're younger? No, but that's that growing process. You're supposed to handle it better as you get older. So if you get older and you're not handling it better, something needs to change. Because, I would say in my own life, I know that I, though not perfectly, handle some situations much better than I would have 15 years ago.
Right.
Because there's that maturing process. And so we always need to be... Sorry, I'm getting the wrap it up symbols.
Usually you give me those, so I'm happy you're getting them.
It's hilarious. So what was I saying? So we always need to be striving because like you said, people are watching. Like we have emphasis, not emphasis, but we have, what do we have for the younger generation?
We have responsibility.
Yes, we have responsibility, and we do have emphasis, but they're
influence.
That's the word I'm looking for. Influence.
This is one of those games. You got it right there.
I'm closing my eyes.
You can do this.
I can do this.
You feel internal pressure, don't you?
I'm feeling so much
Which leads to anxiety. The question is, though, are you empowered?
I am empowered.
Good. Empowered.
All right, let's
I'm
go
empowered
take on
to
the
end.
week.
I'm
Let's
empowered
go
to end
take
the
on
show.
week.
That's what I'm doing. So that's our show for today. It is an interesting article. I will post it under the show notes for you to read, and I will offer this to you that Barna.org, they've got some great research there. They didn't pay me to say this. I need to get with them and say, hey, pay me to give you these commercials. But they've got some great studies there that you can get and make it a part of your library. I think it'll be a blessing to you. So that's all we have. We want to thank everybody at thelightnetwork.tv. Thank you at truth.fm. Check out both of those good works. And check us out online, kylepublications.org. And we also want to invite you to check us out on YouTube. If you've not gone to our YouTube channel yet, please do so. And subscribe. I think that you will find some useful information. If nothing else, you will find some information and ability to laugh at Aaron and I. So, Aaron, do you have anything else?
I don't.
That's all I have. We are out. Y'all have a great evening.
Please hang up and try again.